Hello, everyone. This is the Nameless One, and tonight we will be continuing our Creator Roundup with Writers 3. For those of you, before we get started, that are interested in seeing more of what I do, as well as any other shenaniganery that I happen to be posting, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, ring the notification bell, follow on Twitch, all that good stuff. More about how to support the channel at the end. And to start us off, I'm gonna pick on Matsu. You get to introduce who you are, what you do, and favorite author, in or out of the fandom.
Hello, I am Matsu. Ignore the thing that just fell in the back. I am a Brazilian writer. I usually write dark fantasy and horror stories. As for favorite author, I think I'll have to go with Mark Danilowski, which is the guy who made House of Leaves, aka my favorite book of all times that I use as inspiration for most of my work. So that's it.
Okay. Golly, your turn.
Hey, hello, I am Golly Forever. I make music, but today I am a writer. I write mostly fan fiction for My Little Pony, mostly Cozy Glow related, but I do have other stuff in the works. Most of it has been in greens on the MLP thread on 4chan, and I'm slowly working on bringing them towards film fiction, where I will post my stuff there. As far as favorite author, that one throws me off guard because I have not thought about that. I don't really pay attention to the author. It's the works that I get into reading, interested in. So I guess it's whoever I'm currently reading, which right now I'm not reading. I'm not in the middle of anything. Well, I guess I am. I'm waiting for authors to update their stuff, but I forget who's actually writing what.
You got a name?
I know the story they're working on that I'm reading is Dawn Adopted on Film Fiction. So whoever's writing that one currently is my favorite.
Okay.
That's that reflects poorly on me that I don't know. I'm sorry.
Minty.
But it's the work that's important. Anyway, go ahead.
Minty, your turn.
Hello, I'm Minty Root. I do fan animations and I write them as well. I didn't think of a favorite writer. You caught me off guard. So sorry, I don't have one.
Okay. In that case, Ice.
Hello, I am... Is my mic picking up?
Yes.
Just gotta make
Yep.
sure. Okay. Hello, I am Ice, also known as Crystal. I mostly play D&D, which is basically writing if you think about it. I also write some poetry. And my favorite author would be J.S. Morin. He's a relatively small author, and he writes mostly sci-fi.
Okay. And of course, I am the Nameless One. If you don't know me, then welcome to the channel. Don't forget to subscribe. I do quite a bit of writing, actually. I am most well known for my grimdark horror and like creepypasta-esque writing. I do other types of writing, but that's a little more infrequently. And as far as favorite author, I'd say it'd have to be tied between J.R.R. Tolkien and H.P. Lovecraft. Those of you that know me will not be even slightly surprised. But let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start out with the usual first questions for these. For those of you that haven't been here, done this before, mainly Ice, creative process is the first one we're going to go with. And I'm going to make Matsu go first. Again.
All right. For my creative process, I think the first thing I like to do is the good old brainstorming. Pull up a document, put all my ideas in there. Usually, the ideas for my stories come from like either something that I watched, something that I played, and then I had like a burst of inspiration. I was like, wow, I want to write about that maybe. So I pull up a document, put all my ideas in there. Everything pretty much scattered, at least in the initial part. And then I try to organize everything. I use Google Docs a lot for that, like set up chapters and characters and story arcs and everything that I want to do, like the main points before I start writing. So it's funny enough, sometimes that's all I do, and then I don't actually write the thing. But oh well. Man, I love brainstorming and not touching the thing. But yeah, when I do write the thing, then I usually keep returning to that first document where I put everything, all the important information that I'm going to use for the writing itself, and that's pretty much it. Pretty much it. You get inspired, brainstorm, make a document, and then start writing.
Okay. So I'm going to let our screenwriter go next, since that's a bit of a different type of writing.
Oh, you meant me?
Yes.
Sorry.
You're
So
the
the main
only
idea-
you're the only animator here.
I was thinking, oh, is there another screenwriter that I'm not aware of? So the main idea is that you need to start. In my case, I start with a seed of an idea that can grow different branches. For example, with the False Sunset Shimmer, the seed that drove everything was the realization that Celestia doesn't really have friends. So the idea of having Celestia trying to ask people to make friends is kind of hypocritical. And then that seed got into the idea of a suggestion of making something about Sunset Shimmer.
I'm
So
sorry,
what
I need to make a quick joke.
you can go ahead.
You're saying Celestia has no maidens?
Well,
I feel like that might have gone over a few people's heads, but I had to make the joke.
With missing out, the idea, the core idea was the idea that Starlight has never seen the Golden Oak Library, and then I got inspired by memories of Nightmare Nights 2017 when I saw some people talk about all the cons before that, and it was the last one, so I couldn't see anything of that anymore. So just the idea of a past I couldn't see, and the idea that since Starlight was from season 5, she missed out on a lot of things, and then a lot of things just came through logical means. And the whole idea then is that you take those ideas, you make an outline of how things would go, you start writing a screenplay. In my case, I go with a Google Doc and an option called Screenplay Formatter. Some people have more fancy solutions for that, but for my needs, perfectly fine. And the whole idea is to try to make a screenplay that's impactful with a set amount of pages. For example, in this case, the screenplay was only 8 pages long because you have a certain limit of animation you can do. So being able to use all those events and make it fit within that context was very, very interesting as a challenge. So, and for the ones that don't have any dialogue, a lot of it comes down to the outline, and then you have to do the structural role work. It's basically just the same work you have when you set up all your events with writing, but you don't really write them as a set of dialogue, a set of event descriptions. You just draw them from the outline.
Okay. That all you had? I'll take the resounding silence as a yes. Ice, your turn.
Okay, well, creative process. As a poet, there isn't really too much creative process. Well, I suppose it depends on the type of poet. I personally write for myself, so for me, it's simply just about writing out your emotions, and because feelings are hard to describe, and the English language does not really have words that directly describe specific feelings, most of the poetry just comes from trying to describe your feelings in a way that will evoke them in somebody else. So you start with a feeling and then you try to describe it, and that's my creative process.
Okay. And golly.
All right. My creative process usually starts with a bit of inspiration. I will see a prompt or something mentioned in passing in a thread or in conversation, and I'll just take that idea and just start running with it. I'll post a few paragraphs of just, it would be funny if this thing happens, and then this happens, and all this is because this, and suddenly the brainstorming just starts coming in hard, and suddenly there's a little bit of lore and there's backstory coming in over here. Oh wait, because of this that leads to that, and it all references this other thing that was previously mentioned, and it might go like that for a little while, and a lot of my writings will just kind of stop there. Like, well, that was fun to talk about and have a good laugh. But every now and then, it's like, you know what? I really got something there. I will continue this and refine it. So I'll take that and I'll put it in my word processor and start really building on it and revising it until I have the makings of the beginnings of a story. And I will work on it from there and start adding to it. And depending on wherever I am deciding to put it for people to read or see, I might post an early version of that, and then get the comments and reviews or whatever. From there, I will continue to revise it and read it over and over. Much like in writing music, just keep consuming it myself and looking for places where I can add to it or change it or make it a little bit better here and there. And then once I'm out of ideas every time I take another pass at it, then that's when I consider it mostly done and post the final version of it. And then the process starts all over again. Either I'll use that as the base of a way to continue it into another story, or make my own connected universe of stories that way.
Ah, yes, the sagas.
Yes, like the one I'm currently working on.
That all you had?
I think so.
Okay.
That pretty much covers it.
So before I get into mine, I do have a question. By show of hands or hooves, um, how many of you actually use drafts? Like first, second, third, fourth, fifth draft, whatever. However many it takes. But how many of you actually use drafts?
Pretty much everything I write is technically considered a draft. I just iterate on that. One of the best example I can think of is the first draft I have for Missing Out was entirely different until I realized that I should cut the whole second half of it.
So yours is a little more like the traditional idea of a draft, where it's like you write the whole thing down and then you scrap that one, start all over again with a second draft kind of deal.
I think of it less as scrapping the whole thing over and just using the copy feature. Basically, just making a new copy just to be able to see what the older version was like.
Okay.
And then I can compare how the whole thing was. Because sometimes you're going to ask, like, why did I feel like it was more impactful with that version, even though that version was worse overall? And then you can look back at those pages and then compare. Was the structure, was the structural difference, for example, or you realize, for example, that you had a really good line of dialogue that you cut out, and you ask yourself, why did I cut it out? It was perfect. And then you can just take it back.
What about the other three?
For me, go ahead.
You
You
go
go first.
Okay, I'll go first. Fine. I do, especially for poetry. I'll have like 3 parallel versions of the poem that I'm working on at times, just because I might go with a different style if it works better, and I won't know until I've basically finished 2 or 3 versions of the poem. So I'll do it for that. For basically any other type of writing, I basically just edit inline.
Okay. Golly, your turn.
Yeah, I would like to say that I work in drafts like the perpetual draft is continuously advancing, improving.
Okay.
Although I post it as I go, and then I'll just go back and revise the post. Although this next one I'm going to be working on, I want to take it more seriously and really put a much higher effort into, because the story is getting serious, and uh, it's time to advance to a higher level of writing, so to speak.
Okay. Matsu, what about you?
I wouldn't say I use a lot. I do like a lot of drafts, but I do them. I usually take my sweet time writing like a chapter for the thing that I'm writing. So exactly as to like not have to come back and redo the entire thing. But of course, you always messed up here and there. So I like reread it, rewrite it. Especially if I don't know, like took a path that I notice that isn't going to work, and I like, oh, okay, I'll just restart it, like do a second draft, take another path. But yeah.
Okay. So, as a writer, I have noticed there are two primary types of writers. There's the very meticulous ones. They'll have like 15 drafts of the same work, and sometimes it may be even just minor edits that they changed, but they needed another draft for it. And then there's writers like me that I like to describe as "fuck it, we ball." Um, the way that I do my writing is I will come up with an idea or find a concept that I like. It's been anything from like overarching sagas to somebody mentioned I was cursed with cameras, and I'm gonna eventually turn that into a creepypasta. Um, so from there, I have a very particular process. I will sit down in a specific spot in my house, crank the music as loud as it'll go with whatever's appropriate for the mood of what I'm doing. And then about 8 hours later, I will realize I haven't eaten all day. And then whatever I come out with, I will read over for like minor edits, grammar, stuff like that. Things that, because I have a tendency, I will start writing faster than my brain will start producing sentences faster I can write it. And then so I'll go back over and make sure all of that's fixed. And then I throw it out to the world. For those of you that have read anything from me, 99% of it was first draft with maybe minor edits. And I've noticed that that tends to be a rarer type of writer, because I know lone and fiction also do basically the same thing, though fiction tends to be a lot more structured on like the planning portion, whereas me and lone, from what I could remember talking to the two of them about it in a previous creator roundup, we both kind of just like, yeah, this idea, we're just gonna go. But yeah, not saying that either type is better or wrong, right? Doesn't matter either way. It's just kind of whatever fits for you is what I found is like, because the draft types have a tendency to get a little absorbed in over iterating, whereas people like me will throw things out there without like where it could be better, but we're done with it, so it's just gonna go out there. So each one has a pros and cons, I've noticed, and each one will kind of lead to different types of works. Moving on to the next question, and I'm gonna make Ice answer this one first. What is this is the two-parter. What is the thing that you wish you had been told before you started writing, and what would you tell a brand new writer just starting out? Like, what would you tell them to help them out?
Well, it's less about what I wished I was told starting out, or wish I got told sooner, and I just wish that they didn't teach us about poetry in school, because they taught us about like the Edgar Allan Poe poetry, which is like super Victorian. You're pretending to be smarter than everybody else, and yeah, that's not fun to write as a poet who just wants to do that for fun. So that kind of tainted my view of poetry for years and years. And I didn't get into it until like a year ago, maybe.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, because there's this thing called iambic pentameter, and that just even the idea of that just made me despise poetry as on principle.
Yeah, it was awful. I did not enjoy that. I mean, it's cool to know about, but like that shouldn't be taught as the only way poetry is, because it isn't. What was the other part of that?
Biggest piece of advice that you would give to a new writer? I guess in your
write
case,
for yourself.
Yeah, that's actually
Don't
a really
write
good
for
one.
other people. Other people don't know what they're talking about, and they don't know what they want. And you'll make better writing if you just write for yourself.
I will come with a bit of a caveat to that. If you are writing for an audience, keep that audience in mind, but don't write. So like what I mean by that is what Ice is saying is write what you want to write. But if you are writing for an audience, you don't want to use things that only you would understand. You don't want to make references that require them to be personally involved with your life story to understand necessarily, unless that is the type of writing that you are trying to do, like an autobiography, or like you're just trying to write something that's like a vent piece or something like that. That doesn't need to be considering an audience, because you are the audience. Whereas
I suppose as a clarification then, if you're starting out writing, write for yourself, because that'll help you learn how to write.
Okay.
And it'll also help you find out what audience you want to write for.
Mm-hmm. Matsu.
Okay. I guess for things I wish I knew, pretty obvious, but I still messed up on that department, which is try to make sure that the random ideas that pop in my mind are worth like several months of my life, which usually aren't. So I used to do. I'm gonna say I used to do it a lot, but I still do it sometimes. But like, I will have this. Wow, that's a revolutionary idea. I love it. I'm gonna do it, and then I do like a 200-page document about it, and then eventually I just, oh, actually, that's not what I wanted to do. I just wasted all my time.
So you get stuck in the world builder. I like to call it the world builder fallacy. That's probably not even close to what it actually is, but essentially you just sit there building the world, and then when it comes to writing the story, you go, I'm not really interested in this more. And next thing you know, you spent 18 years on a manuscript.
Absolutely.
Don't ask me why I picked that number.
Definitely improved in that department, but I'm not going to say that I'm perfect there now. I still do it sometimes. But yeah, I definitely wish I knew that before.
I've found that every novel style writer has this like propensity towards let me world build the hell out of this. And I don't know for poets and screenwriters, do you guys have similar issue?
For poetry, no, but for character backstories, yes.
What about you, Minty? Do you have issues with overbuilding your worlds while you're trying to get ready for a animation?
Somewhat. One of the issues of my very first project is that I tried to throw a lot of ideas together to try to drive as much as possible a character. And one of the main problems I realized at that point, and that's a thing I would wish to tell a younger version of myself to focus on that first, focus on the structure of the structure and the narrative in a way that because one of the things, if you look, for example, at the very first version of Project Undercloud, a lot of it was basically just Derpy just telling about her life the whole time, and then a little thing happened at the end, and that's pretty much it. You don't really have much of a structure to be able to drive the drama of the story. You don't really have, like, you don't really drive much the incident in a way where you feel like all the other elements are gonna flow through it. For example, if you compare with the new version, which is not released yet, so I can't really spoil too much. But the whole idea is that there's a massive thunderstorm that's coming, and then you're wondering, like, why is Derpy the one who's still there? And then you draw from that to build a structure to make all the events flow together in a way that makes sense. I don't throw like 100 ideas to you at the same time and expect you to be able to piece it together while it's going on. Like I'm giving you at least something you can pull at, and you can be able to follow how all of it culminates, and then you can see how it drives the decisions of the characters as well. But all of it just comes down to the structure, because, like, if you had a book where you started the first half of the book just explain the world building, and then at the second half you start having stuff happening randomly, like nobody would want to watch that. So, did I say watching a book?
I think you
they're
did.
gonna adapt it as a Netflix series anyway. So the whole idea, I'm mostly talking about structure because one of the best examples people talk about when it comes to screenplays, for example, Star Wars, it starts really fast and it gives you a lot in a very well built manner, and just because it just flows in a specific way, that's where the audience can actually follow it. You don't need. I think one of the examples people kept giving was the first Dune movie, not the one we had with Dimity. It was my hometown. Keep forgetting his name, which is quite embarrassing because I'm the only one who can pronounce his last name. Denis Villeneuve, not that one, the one before, where they had to basically just give a whole bunch of exposition before just to explain the stuff they forgot to explain in the movie. So, and that's a bit why I'm thinking, like, you need to structure the things in a way where you explain the things along. And, sometimes you're going to have the audience not figuring out everything at the same time. And some people are going to be frustrated because you might get some explanation later that adds up. But think of the structure as what you're making.
Okay. And Mats, the other half of the question.
But yeah, I just wish I could look back at my younger self and say, hey, you know that giant list of topics and really cool ideas and scenes you made that you really want to implement all of them. Maybe you won't implement all of them. Maybe you won't implement even half of them, and that's not necessarily bad. As for the advice, I guess take every piece of external advice with a grain of salt. Like, not everything is set in stone, or everything is good for everything, and not everything is good for you or in your writing style. There probably are some universally good advices over there. Like, I don't know, don't push yourself too hard. I guess that's pretty universally good. But other than that, don't take every single piece of advice to your head. Like, oh God, okay, this is how I must do it now. Like, because this person does it like that, so I should do the same. It doesn't exactly work like that. So yeah.
That's how you end up with everybody writing the same shit.
Absolutely.
Golly.
All right. For the first part of the question, that is, what did I wish I was told when I started? One really good one is learn to write in whatever proper style for what you're writing and be consistent with it. Are you writing in the first person, past tense, present, and so on? Learn that and really keep an eye out on what you're writing. Make sure it's the same all the way through. Even when it comes down to punctuation use, a lot of people like to go dot 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 dot. A lot of ellipses, they're everywhere. You don't need all that many. You can do better than that by writing out how they trail off or how they have more to say but aren't, or will say later. That's a really that would have saved a lot of time going back and with all my revisions and stuff. Like, oh, I need to change the tense of everything that was ever said here, and that's like, hundreds and thousands of words to go and change a few letters on each one, and so on. As far as advice that I would tell somebody just starting out, two things. One, learn criticism as intended. A lot of people are going to sound like they're being really mean when they tell you what's wrong with your story or what you're writing, and they're not. They're genuinely trying to help you most of the time if you go to the right places for that. So learn to listen to what they say and apply it as necessary. The second thing I would say is don't start off thinking you're going to write your big magnum manuscript,
Magnum opus.
Magnum opus. It's not going to happen on your first writing or your second or your third or maybe even your 100th. Just if you write, you like writing, just write. It will happen. Or you'll end up with a huge saga and connected universe, and that eventually becomes some kind of magnum opus.
Okay. And Minty. Minty,
Yeah,
it's your turn to answer the question.
I already answered the question.
Well, not exactly.
Okay, can you re-ask the question? Because the way I think I answered mine was weird.
You were kind of just piggybacking. We were making conversation during Matsu's answer. The question was a two-parter. First part is what do you wish you had been told before you started writing? And then the second part is your advice to brand new writers.
Oh, I think that the advice to brand new writers still comes down to that one. The idea of considering the structure of the way that you build things.
Okay.
I'm mostly just thinking, think not, when you look at, for example, a screenplay you really like, don't think of the big events, think of how the structure of the screenplay works. Because you're going to think, for example, of a big movie that has that one scene that's really cool, and people might want to replicate that one scene in their own way. And then they realize, the whole thing is kind of a mess because everything else structurally is just a mess. You don't build up the characters, you don't forget to learn anything, but you have that one scene where the character says something really meaningful to you, but you don't really make any effort to make it work with the rest of the structure because you think that it's going to be the one thing driving everything else. I'm also thinking, think of how your story is driven by choices, like how those choices are driven by the characters and how it's going to drive the narrative. Because one of the problems of my first screenplays is that people kept just going through the motion, and you wouldn't really get to learn much about them besides how they kind of reacted to other events. So, and I'm thinking you want to know how those characters are going to face those tough decisions and how they're going to respond. Are they going to do the right thing? Are they going to do the wrong thing but learn from it? So that's what I would go with.
Okay. And so for mine, something that somebody had told me before I started, not everybody's going to enjoy everything that you write. As a grimdark writer, I have a tendency to have lots of audience members, or even horror or anything like that, that are just like, this is too scary, this is too dark, too depressing, things like that. So just kind of coming to grips with that was something that took me a little while before I was just like, you know what, fuck it, I write what I want. As for the second part, So this is a term that a lot of writers, and especially a lot of screenwriters, probably hear quite a bit. Show don't tell. Now, for somebody like Minty, that's a little easier because there's a visual medium to it.
You
However,
would think, but as an animator, there's always that little shortcut of just having characters giving dialogue, and then you think, oh, it's dialogue, so they talk, they move, and you kind of show the animation, and then you realize that a lot of it is just exposition in a way. And you're gonna think, well, I do show the thing that's happening, but you don't realize that that whole exposition is just because someone tells you that that thing happened. So
so for writers, when I say show don't tell, the idea is that, say you have a type of scene where like somebody is feeling some sort of emotions. Telling would be telling the just point blank saying X character is sad. That is what a writer would be considered telling. Now, where a lot of new writers get hung up is the fact that no matter what you do, you're technically telling everything. Now, showing in writing is essentially you, instead of telling them directly, this character is sad, you would describe what is happening around the character's emotions, and talk about the character rather than telling the audience the character is sad. And I have found, as somebody who does both paid and unpaid editing, as well as like a lot of writing help for people, that is a concept that a lot of new writers struggle really hard with, and a lot of accomplished writers struggle to explain. Because how do you show don't tell when your medium is entirely the written word? I would also say that it's also very important for screenwriters to understand the difference between show don't tell on theirs, like Minty brought up as well. Because if you just have characters have conversations as the medium of which you deliver important information instead of showing the audience what's going on, then it's called an exposition dump. And people don't like to be dumped on.
it's also worth noting that giving it as a piece of exposition is going to remove a lot of detail out of it. Like if you're going to just say like Princess Luna is sad and that's it, like how is she going to express that sadness? The way that she does it is going to give you so much more than just saying, well, she's sad, she kind of that down and that's it. But if you show a whole way that she expresses that sadness, it's so much more powerful and you feel it a lot more as an audience member.
And it's the same way with novel style, and I'd imagine poetry. I'm not as much of a poet, but I'd imagine show don't tell often applies as well for a lot of the same type of prose.
I'd say it's probably show don't tell is probably the definition of poetry.
Yeah,
Because if you want to describe this like pretty flower, you can say, I saw a pretty flower on my way to work today. That's not poetry, that's a text message. What makes it poetry is when you're trying to describe the flower and describing the awe felt by the person who saw it or whatever.
one thing that I use kind of as an example is a kind of a show don't tell. Is I was helping somebody write, and they were having a character walk through a library, and their initial start was one sentence, and through the use of prose and the use of imagery and all the other fancy grammatical words, I turned that one sentence into 3 paragraphs, and I would use things like describing the light coming through the stained glass windows as fairies like fairies flitting through the dust-filled halls and things like that. That is the kind of stuff that really changes the tell into a show where you really immerse your reader in the world that you. Because one thing that I've also noticed that new writers have a tendency to do is they will forget they have control of the camera, for lack of a better way to say it. For screenwriters, it's quite literally control of the camera. So you don't always have to it doesn't have to be one long shot. You can take somebody from the situation and say, we'll use Minty's stuff as an example. Say you were following Derpy, but you need to show Luna is sad. You can cut away to show Luna being sad and expressing her emotions, and then go back to Derpy. That's not anything technically wrong with that, as long as it still flows within the purviews of your story.
It's also worth noting when you have a screenplay for an animation, for example, the screenplay for the animation doesn't describe a lot of what's going on visually except the actions of the characters. So, for example, if you're going to have, for example, taking like Ponyville during winter, you will not be very descriptive of the things that are happening visually if it's not happening to the actions. So you're not going to describe all the, for example, if they're going to have snowmen that are just in the background, they're not going to be impacted by the characters, for example, you're not going to have to worry about describing it. Sometimes the description of the environment is literally just going to be Ponyville day, and that's it. And then you have to focus on everything else that's going on. For example, if you're going to describe how Applejack is doing something, you're going to describe it in a way that affects the character's acting, and you can also describe the way that it affects the way that they talk. But for example, you don't describe all the details of how dirty they are. If, for example, Applejack fell into a butt of mud, you won't worry about that. You let the animators know how to do it. And that's why, in this case, it's very collaborative. You're going to have the screenwriter that's going to work on a really good screenplay, and then you're going to have the storyboard artists who are going to be able to take the screenplay and actually tell very well visually what's going on. Because one of the things, for example, you don't describe the camera changes too much in the screenplays. Unless it's very, very specific, they're going to describe it. For example, I remember in the Across the Spider-Verse screenplay, they discussed a bit some of the cuts and how they happened, especially for the montages. But everything else, for example, if you think of My Little Pony, if you're going to have a dialogue between Luna and Derpy, you're not going to describe how you cut from one character to the other. If you're going to do one-er or you're going to go with close-ups, you don't describe that bit. So it's very important that you have a very good screenwriter and a very good storyboard artist who can work with it. And sometimes you're going to have productions that describe as board-driven, where pretty much everything is happening at the same time because the writer is the storyboard artist.
Mm-hmm.
And board-driven is mostly very effective for comedies because then you can land your punch at the right, very specific right time. So.
Okay. Next question we're going to do, and so this one will apply to whichever form of writing that you do the most, but what, in your opinion, is the most important part of writing as a writer? Ice, you get to go first again.
Oh, cool. I get to give the easy answer. Have fun.
Like, have fun is your answer?
Yes. If you're writing but not having fun and not getting paid to do that writing, then find something else to do, I guess. It should be fun.
Okay. But you don't make this easy. Matsu, your turn.
All right, so I think you should have fun. No, just kidding. I guess I'll go back to my universally good advice. Don't try and push yourself too hard. Because it's another easy answer, I guess. can't really iterate too much on it.
Okay. You guys aren't helping me out here much. Golly, you got something for me?
Please restate the question. I want to make sure I answer better.
In your opinion, for whatever type of writing that you do, what is the most important part?
Oh yeah. Have fun.
God.
No. It's the opposite. It should hurt. You should pour your emotions and your feelings, put your all into it. If you're not exhausted and tired of writing when you're done. No, it's a tough question to really just answer more thoroughly than that right off. Yeah, I got to apologize. I already forgot it again. Exactly what you're wanting to hear.
In your opinion, in your preferred form of writing, what is the most important part of writing?
Okay,
Like,
okay.
It could be
So-
like grammar related. It could be it just whatever you think is the most important part of it.
Okay, for me, since I'm concentrating on fan fiction, the most important thing is to know the lore, the backstory, and the universe you're writing for. If you get all the details wrong, then you might as well get out of that and write your own original thing. Which may be a good thing if you want to develop your own lore, an alternate universe. Know what you're getting into, and because fans of the fiction of the universe that you're writing for are going to know what's wrong, and they're going to call you out on it, or they're just going to ignore your story. Like, well, he writes it this way, and that's none of this makes sense, or it's hard. It's a hard read because you have to ignore everything that you already know about it. So know what you're writing for, and be consistent with that world. And if you're not, then it better be a good reason in your writing why things are different.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for saving us.
Yeah, it could also come down to like the style you're writing for. I know that I write a lot of Cozy Glow stuff. I know that my Cozy Glow is very different, very far removed from what we see in the show. But it's I think that's fine because I chalk it up to the style of writing that I'm using, that I'm working with, and it's sort of like it explains itself in the writing. Like, well, that makes sense once you read it, the way it progresses.
Okay. Minty.
I think the most important part is to read. Well, I was gonna say read what you wrote, but I'm gonna specify because it makes the most sense that you're gonna have to read what you wrote because you want to proofread what you did, but to read it through the eyes of the reader, not through your own eyes, because as you're gonna look at it, you say, "Well, I'm proud of it. I wrote very good words that are gonna make you think. That's pretty good," but also think how the audience is going to look at it and what they're going to get out of it. Sometimes it's going to be, for example, like, am I giving the wrong lesson out of it? Because if I do a story on bullying and at the end I realize, like, oh, I'm kind of condoning bullying. What am I doing? And then you reconsider what was your vision out of it. For example, when I worked on The False Sunset Shimmer, the thing I kept thinking of is, how am I going to be properly describing the whole story, not as, for example, well, in this case, I don't want to show that Celestia was the one in the right or in the wrong. I want to show that it's a conflict that, it's a self-wound based on something that was not her fault. She has no control over it, and I wanted the audience to understand that it's not her fault that things happened, but she still has regrets through those things, and she has to self-reflect. So I was thinking, like, how am I going to tell the audience in a way where they're going to understand? Because I don't want to tell people that, okay, it's okay to not have friends, and don't even try. You're going to have to think of the consequences of what you're writing, because you don't want to give people the wrong lesson. You also think of, what are they going to get out of it as a positive lesson, for example. It's even more important if you're going to write something for kids because you don't want to tell kids, how to do pranks that are going to be dangerous. You want to be careful, and you also want to look at it from an audience perspective to make sure that am I trying to be too smart than them, and are they going to be lost in what I'm writing in a way that they're going to be frustrated? Are they going to be are they going to be understanding what I mean? And am I able to actually express myself properly in the writing? And that's the part that I failed a lot in my first projects. Like, I kept doing them as something that I was trying to just prove myself in, rather than realizing how the audience would look at it and how they would understand it.
Mhm.
So a lot of my first animations were very incomprehensible messes. Like, I'm talking like before ponies, even. Like, it was even more incomprehensible.
I mean,
So-
to be fair, whose first attempt at writing anything isn't an incomprehensible mess?
Yeah, but
That's what drafts
there's
are for.
also the part where you don't. There is also the part where you write incomprehensible messes because you were young. But I was old enough to actually read my own stuff, so I should have realized that I was doing a mess anyway. So
Yeah.
The first poem that I wrote that wasn't under duress was actually pretty good, in my opinion.
And by under duress, you're thinking of stuff like what you had to write at school.
Yes.
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 So, since Matsu and Ice were picking fruit off the floor instead of going for the low hanging fruit, I'm a go for the low hanging fruit and actually, make the effort to reach upwards. Imagery is one of the most important things in both prose and poetry, because without imagery, you kind of just don't have either type of writing. Because I could see you arguing that like screenwriting you can get away without having too much imagery in it because the imagery is going to come through in the final product, not the script. But if you don't have imagery describing, like giving even like metaphors and similes or giving visual images through words of what you are trying to describe, nobody's going to be interested. If your story sounds like the C spot run, then nobody's going to want to read that. It's going to be boring. So imagery can make or break a work of fiction, and even in some cases, nonfiction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if your reader can't see what you're writing about, they're going to have a hard time continuing to read.
That's
I remember being
interesting.
described that not as imagery, but as a hook, like what's gonna grab you in, and sometimes it's gonna be visuals, but usually you need something that you get as that moment that drives everything, and yeah, in this case, imagery is very effective. It's a
Yeah.
way to make things feel like they gravitate.
I guess still another part when I like trying to make your readers actually want to read your thing. I think that's me trying to redeem myself. Like trying to not making your writing too tiring. I had a lot of problems of like making my chapters way too long because I wanted to shove everything in a single chapter.
We're not all Project Horizons.
Yeah. Oh man, I love my 50k words chapter. That's chapter 1 by the no, just kidding. But yeah, I think it's really important to not want to shove everything in a single chapter. Try to divide everything, make it easy to read. You're not trying to make a freaking puzzle. Like you want people to read that and enjoy it and not like leave with a headache. Or just, oh, okay, I'll stop like midway through here because I can't take it anymore. So yeah,
Just to kind of add on to what you're saying, Matsu, a way you can do that is with like paragraph breaks and dialogue, and spacing that stuff out will also help with, because I don't know if you've ever sat down at your computer and you got a friend that decided to send a message and they send a 500 word essay or more in one giant wall of text.
pain.
And then your brain shuts down.
Yeah,
That was me before I learned about the magic of formatting.
exactly.
And that's similar for movies. If you're gonna have a scene that's way too long, you're gonna lose people. So you want to have the scenes that have a proper length. And you don't want to have the opposite where you have a scene that lasts like 30 seconds and that's it, because you don't get anything out of it. It's like someone saying hi and that's it. And doesn't elaborate around it. You want you want people to get something out of it.
So it sounds like the answer to this was pacing.
Yes.
Amazing.
But yeah, like Matsu is saying, also very strategically trying to make sure that in order to like keep a reader reading, you don't overdraw the length of a chapter. You don't overdraw the length of a paragraph, because
Mhm.
even a paragraph that's too long can lose some readers. Not all of us are ready to sit down to read Ben-Hur, the full Lord of the Rings trilogy in one go.
Challenge accepted.
It's also worth noting in that kind of story, you're going to have something that starts slow and then ramps up its speed to get the intensity going. And
Try not to start
sometimes
too
what
low,
they do-
though.
Usually what they do is that they start fast and then slow down until it gradually increases to the end. And then you have a nice, it ends at a very specific point where it's the proper intensity and then it goes down. Because if you're going to just go all intensity all the time, you're going to exhaust people, and you're going to have a story where a lot of things happen, but you don't really get to learn much about the characters because nobody has time to breathe. And it's pretty frustrating since you're going to see lots of blockbusters where they try to cram things going because they think that people are excited to see more stuff happening really, really fast all the time.
Or the like really shitty jump cuts through fight scenes where you're just like spinning around in circles going like, where the hell are we? Why am I so sick?
And oh yeah, that part is less writing, more about filmmaking. But one of the reasons why they go with very quick cuts usually is that they have to hide the stuntman, and they want to make sure that you get to see the actor in a couple of shots, and then they cut back and forth to make something that's impactful. Even though you lose a lot of visibility, and you think that you're going to have more impact because more stuff is going to happen at once instead of having something that's very impactful but deliberate. And the best example people usually point to is old Jackie Chan scenes. Like the rhythm that they have actually lets you know what the hell is going on. You actually have wide shots of all the things that are going to happen, and you get to see like you're going to ask like, oh, is that ladder is going to be used? And then you see the buildup of all those elements. And I think you can also compare it to writing, like how you're going to use those elements in a way where you build up those elements you already had and how the characters are going to react. And for example, if you have a scene and you describe in one of the scenes like, oh yeah, there's a ladder by that thing, and then right after you actually pay off that moment, it feels more rewarding than just saying, oh yeah, he has a ladder and he does a 180 with it because it's really cool, and he punches the guy. Like you want people
So
to
the concept of the Chekhov's gun. If you have a gun on the mantelpiece, you got to use it eventually.
Yeah, although I think one of the things that people think of when they think of a Chekhov's gun, they always think of a prop. But you can have that used, for example, if you're going to have a gun, you can have a very tense scene where you have a character who's holding a gun, and he's not going to shoot it, but you draw attention to the fact he could, and the tension just goes from that. And I think it's also very impactful. You have to consider it not as a shoot bang bang thing. Think of it as a thing that draws conflict.
Mm-hmm. That would be accurate. I do actually have something else to add to what Matsu said about the exhausting a reader thing. Now, I've already said before, I am primarily a grimdark writer. And grimdark is known for its very dark and very depressing tones, almost always set in a dystopia, sometimes post-apocalyptic, other times it's just a really shitty time. You can even get some that are mid-apocalypse. But one thing that a lot of grimdark writers, professional grimdark writers, even forget that is that you need to still balance that. So the way that I mean that is when you have a moment of like climactic dark, a low moment where everything is just gone to shit and everything's horrible. Yeah, have those moments, but have small moments in between where you can have characters interacting and doing things like getting to know each other, building relationships, and with it being a grimdark story, you can use that both to give the reader breathing room, but also use it against the reader because the type of writing it is tends to be fairly hostile to readers that aren't prepared for it. So, like, a moment of light and brevity can be turned around and be like a betrayal, or like something happens to the character. But if you rely on just like everything is horrible all of the time, too much, or everything is just blood, gore, and everything is just terrible, it eventually turns into this like exhausting slugfest against the reader that they're just like they tap out eventually. So you need moments that they're not exactly like the beach episode, but they're moments where like they can like sit around a campfire and have a small laugh, even with the overhanging dread of whatever you've set up. One of the I'll let you go in just a sec, but one of the biggest things about Grimdark is always the empiric victory. So you don't have to show necessarily that, they all lost because this is Grimdark. No, it's, and Fallout Equestria is actually a really good example of this. It's we won, but at what cost? In Fallout Equestria, it was the loss of Pip. Because little Pip essentially had to sacrifice herself for everybody else to have a happily ever after. Because in reality, happily ever after doesn't exist. And that's actually what draws a lot of people to Grimdark. What were you going to say, Matsu?
I was just going to quote Darkest Dungeon, a moment of respite, a chance to steel oneself against the coming horrors.
Exactly. And pacing that in a way that you don't spend an eternity draining your audience of all ability to go forward with your fic or your writing or whatever it is. And this would apply to any type of writing that is grimdark in nature.
Some people even read like grimdark and dark fantasy like for those moments of slight hope. Like, oh man, everything is garbage. I wonder like when it's gonna get a little bit better.
Yeah, I got that reading Murky number 7.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of people will also, for like me personally, I love grimdark for those moments because it feels closer to reality, honestly.
Absolutely.
It's that relatability of like you're sucking. Oh, payday. It's you don't think of it as grimdark, but if you look at the way that life tends to happen, it's a series of hardships with moments of levity and moments of light. And so grimdark is one that I've always found feels like it very closely follows a structure that is similar to like real life. And just like real life, nobody can just keep going down. Eventually they have to find something, even if it is the main character succeeding at something, for example. It will go a long way to actually helping a story structure, a story's flow. Do any of you guys have a question that you would like to pose? I've been considering starting doing this because I generally have at least one person that has a question.
I had one earlier. and I forgot it, or maybe we already covered it without me having to ask.
Matsu, did you have something?
No, I don't think so.
Ice?
My brain is shut off.
I have one
Why?
thing about writing and the flow of a story. I was really concerned about, or am really concerned about, in my most recent posting on film fiction, is I go back and forth a lot in this one with a lot of previously, because when we were initially in that scene earlier, it didn't it would just stall the story if I covered everything right there. So like we would go back to it later on when that missing part became relevant. And I'm wondering, is it how much is too much? Is it all right that I did that way, or should I have found a better way to work, all that information in?
So, from what I know about writing, when it comes to that kind of stuff, as long as you have given just like the barest hint of an idea that there's information that, like, it's not just like you're going along and then you need this thing and all of a sudden there's a MacGuffin. If you bring something that should have been mentioned before that's just so far out of left field, that will be an issue. But if it's something that you've kind of seeded these ideas along the way, that's perfectly fine.
Okay. All right, then I think I did it right.
Let me look and see if the audience has any questions. Well, you guys are.
When y'all were talking about Chekhov's gun, I'd like to take that to the extreme, or maybe just do it wrong, where I'll bring something up in a story and then not get back to it until the next story.
Some would call it foreshadowing.
Yeah, it's mostly a running gag when you see a movie and they introduce something and you can clearly tell it's not for that movie. It's basically just to build off something.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's been mocked to death because a lot of it is just not gonna come back just because the movie it's been into that. It's basically got canceled because I don't know, didn't make enough money or the new exec is in charge. And it's definitely one of those things where you wonder, like, is it worth putting in? And I had a scene in Bright as in the Thunderclouds actually where I was wondering, like, it fits the theme, but it's mostly just for a future project. And I'm thinking, like, should I keep it in? Like, technically it works with this story, but it's mostly just like a bonus. Like, it's the one thing you're wondering, like, is it definitely a gamble you're gonna ask yourself.
I
And
say even. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
a lot of it's subjective because sometimes you're gonna put a throw. Sometimes you're gonna throw a red herring just to
red
divert
herrings are fun.
From
Yeah.
the audience because sometimes you want to make people throw guesses. For example, you're gonna have the idea of that. I don't know. You have a story that's about Nightmare Moon, and then you throw a red herring about Star Swirl. And it's not that you don't pay that off; is that you reveal to the audience, "Oh yeah, that was not about that thing. It's the whole different thing." Like you can do that. It's mostly just that you need to gauge how the audience is going to react to it.
You also, one of the things that you can do with that is lay subtle hints along the way. Like if somebody were to see that twist ending and then go back and watch it over, they could see where they could have picked up on it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fun. Red herrings are fun. I've learned to start dropping little things here and there that I could go back to later in a future story, or they just get forgotten about. Because you can only, or rather, you can't go back and change the story that you finalized. I mean, you can, but then it's not fair to the reader, and you can't expect them to reread it and reestablish their understanding of your story. You can only move forward in your writing. So while you're writing, it's for me at least, I like to have stuff that I can call back to. Like, oh yeah, I remember they found this one thing over there, and I never got around to exploring that. Well, it's important here now because of this.
I would also say the Chekhov's gun thing you were talking about. I also known it as sequel baiting, and you want to be very careful with that and make sure that you actually know that you're going to continue it, because otherwise you get a lot of angry fans that are like, "Where's the next one? You set this big thing up, and now we're just sitting here waiting."
The budget fell through.
I know anime can be pretty bad about that. Same with the movie industry.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Minty?
Well, one of the problems mostly with that sequel baiting is mostly that what you're gonna have is that think of it like spare parts that they put in your I don't know, you buy something from IKEA and you have a couple of spare parts there, and you think like, are they just hoping that I'm gonna buy the thing that those spare parts are part of just because it's there? And it feels like lazy. It feels like they just don't want to commit to that idea until a sequel just because they want people to be interested in that sequel. And I think doing it the other way around is more interesting. Like you have some ideas that you explore a lot more in the sequel, like the ideas that are important in the first one that you realize that you can draw even more involvement in it. And one of the examples I'm thinking of is in Luna's Determination. You have a scene where you have Luna still a filly, and she has a little cloak covering her wings. And at first, when I came up with that idea, I was thinking, okay, she's covering her wings just because she's an alicorn in a unicorn kingdom, and that's it. And then at the beginning of Harmony, all of that actually draws to a scene where you have an old unicorn mare who basically just makes some cloaks to cover their wings and with some nice patterns, and then you realize that she has one with a really, really fancy pattern that implies that she used to raise the sun and the moon. And those ideas just came down from extruding ideas that I already had that were very helpful in the first one. It's not having like, I don't know, a MacGuffin in your current movie that you don't pay off, and then you're saying like, oh yeah, I'm not paying off that thing, but I'm gonna show that in a sequel. It's more like drawing into something that that actually worked in the previous one, but you can actually get more meaning out of it. And I think it's more impactful that way because you don't have to worry too much about what you're gonna write in the sequel, because in the sequel you then look back at what you did, and then you can work on how you can actually make the first one count even more by drawing what you had.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm mostly thinking about that because when I wrote Dinky's Destiny, a lot of things are just saying like, oh yeah, that thing doesn't make sense right now, but it's gonna make sense in the sequel. And people got really frustrated. People got really angry about the fact that there's no payoff for that. Like, why is she shattering like porcelain doll? Why is Nightmare Moon feeling so emo about everything? Like, why all of it go? And the whole plan I had at the first place was, oh, it's not going to make sense now, but it's going to make sense in the future. And people hated it. And looking back at it, I totally understand why.
Yeah, viewers and readers don't generally enjoy being narratively blue-balled. So,
I wouldn't say it like that, but you're right.
The writer can enjoy blue balling.
But one last thing before we call it for tonight. So this is a bit of advice from me to any writers and any editors and anything like that out there. Kind of any creative, if I'm being entirely honest. One of the major things that I've noticed as an editor for other writers is that try to stick to things that you understand. I have watched editors that will go in on these concepts that we've been talking about, like Chekhov's gun, over things that were definitely not a Chekhov's gun. It was set dressing and stuff like that, or like an author will use words or phrases that they have no clue what it actually means, so they say something completely opposite of their intended meaning, stuff like that. try to make sure that anything that you try to write, any kind of information you put to page or to screen, you understand the context with which you are using it, and make sure that it actually means what you want.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah, I write
Absolutely.
and I have a search engine next to me, to make sure I'm using whatever it is I use in the correct way.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And like that isn't to say like that you can experiment with things that you don't know, but like that's why it's called learning. Like you're not like, oh yeah, I have no idea what this thing's all about. I'm gonna do it and post it and call it a day. Like no, you read about it, you learn about it, and then you start like working on it.
and just because you know the term exists and you can point at something and say this is that, does not mean that you're necessarily the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
I have seen an editor that accused somebody of using a Chekhov's gun when when it was literally just set dressing. So in that situation, he just wanted to sound smart. Don't do that.
Mhm.
You
It's
go ahead.
it's the equivalent whenever you have a screenwriter doing some technobabble about stuff that he doesn't know about.
Yeah,
Like one of my favorite jokes, there was a subreddit called "It's a Unix machine," and then you see just blatant uses of technology in ways that just makes no sense. There was one guy who was saying like, "We're gonna use an e-nuke to blow up his computer," and you had like a JPEG of a nuke, and you'd actually see it launched. And it would basically just paralyze the other guy's computer, and you take it like, this comes down to a writer that has probably never touched a computer in his life, or has learned about it from his grandmas who learned about computers on the TV, and is just explaining a bit the rough idea of how someone could get a virus. And she really thinks that someone's gonna get a virus by infecting an email with something, and it just actually infects it like a real virus.
It's like those police dramas or crime show, when they show a computer hacking.
Yeah.
Or try to
or
explain it.
all of
I'm in.
all of those medical dramas where they're just like, we need to intubate. He's breathing just fine. What do you mean you need to intubate?
They
We
use
need
the
to
shark
restart his
models and
heart,
everything.
and then he uses a different
Yeah.
a defibrillator.
And he needs mouse bites to live.
Like, try there is a certain amount of suspension of disbelief that is permissible, but if you have somebody that's walking around breathing and you're telling people you need to intubate them, you have no clue what you are talking about. You need to go write about something else.
Mhm.
Right.
In filmmaking, one of the things I keep saying, like, okay, if you're a student filmmaker and you're making a short film about something, and you have, I don't know, teenagers, young adults, don't make it about an old general. People are not going to believe you. And I think it also applies to writing. Like, you can't just write about stuff that you have vague knowledge of without at least asking someone who knows what he's doing.
Research.
And sometimes you're going to ask, like, how can I have that thing happen in my book to and make it make sense? Like, I don't know, I have a scene with someone who's just holding antimatter. How can I make it happen, but in a way that's scientifically plausible? And my favorite anecdote about that is the writers of Star Trek, especially the Next Generation. Like, they weren't scientists, so they would basically write the drama, and whenever you have the character actually saying something that was scientific, they would just write tech and just let the scientists figure that part out.
Yeah. On along those lines of using wrong terminology and whatnot, I would say if you're writing a comedy and your character is an idiot, go for it.
Yeah, satire, comedy, stuff like that. You can do it for that, but if you're doing like all of these like medical dramas and things like that,
Yeah, if you want to be
they
taken seriously.
yeah, do your research beforehand. Understand what's actually happening before you start spewing jargon that you don't even understand. Or if you're trying to help somebody else with their writing, make sure you check yourself before you check them. Because if you don't know what they're talking about and they do, you're just going to sound like an asshole.
Yep.
And another example was given. It was a bit like that. It's a bit different, but one of the things I kept taking is, okay, if you like Transformers, for example, don't just make everything Transformers. Like, learn about other stuff that you might be interested in, but more diverse ideas. Like, don't just make the thing that's popular, but slightly different. Because sometimes you're gonna have some people who just realize, like, I really like that movie. Let's make my own version where it's slightly different. And then you realize that the guy had no original idea ever. Like, you want to draw from other inspirations than just the big popular thing. You want to sometimes you're going to draw from your own childhood, your own memories. Although don't mix memories and that kind of experience with with cinema. You want something that's good, not just something that's personal. But you want to have something that draws from more inspirations than just the popular thing. So, for example, I don't know, I was reading and was watching documentaries about cold fusion for some reason. I wasn't even planning on writing anything about it, but it felt insightful, and I was thinking maybe I could get an idea out of it. I could have some inspiration from one of the guys that did something. Like, I can draw from that source rather than just drawing from that one popular movie everybody likes. Because
Yeah.
otherwise it's very tiresome.
On the flip side of all of this, you also need to be careful and consider your audience. If you are not writing for somebody that is super into, I'll use the medical drama again as an example, like super into the medical field, you don't want to go in depth on like using the term is called jargon. So essentially, if you work in say the medical field, you're not going to want to tell somebody who doesn't know what you're talking about they have an epistaxis. They're going to think they have cancer. What you want to do is tell them they have a bloody nose. So
it's also worth noting, like, the way that you're going to explain it to the audience. For example, like, you might have a character trying to explain to the person, oh yeah, you have that thing, it's going to mess up with that organ, and then you get something that's a bit more natural to explain that. Or sometimes what you might have is really just people who talk about stuff you're not supposed to understand, and the whole point is that as an audience, you're not supposed to understand what's going on. For example, there's a character who's looking at a bunch of doctors that are just in panic, and then you realize that, oh, it's massive trouble where the main character can do anything just because all of that is just jargon. But if it's supposed to be a drama where you're the main character and the doctor, you want to understand what he's doing. And a lot of it just comes down to be very tricky because you don't want to be you don't want to be belittling your audience by trying to make them sound like idiots. So
Yeah.
finding the right balance is tough.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important. Finding the right balance in jargon and normal speak. I work at a very technical place with a lot of experts and engineers, and they don't all talk like that about their work. They might throw in some acronyms here and there about anything specific that they're talking about, but they don't speak jargon. They speak English.
Yep. Especially
Well, you
since
say that, but I was discussing with an artist and was saying, "Oh yeah, we have an IP happening here," and then he goes like IP, and then I had to explain, "Oh yeah, it's short for interpenetration." I was thinking, oh yeah, I've been saying it for so long, it kind of lost meaning.
yeah,
So
if you're immersed in a field, you will find that you will say things that people will give you a funny look, but and this is kind of more of a life advice thing. If you live and work in those kinds of fields, you have to stop to think, is this person also in this field? Because otherwise you could just get the person that's like, yeah, I totally understand. In the meantime, they're just trying really hard not to sound like they're an idiot, even though they're not supposed to know what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, sometimes you can make a joke out of it, but you don't want to make the joke against the audience. You want to make the joke in a way where the audience actually laughs together. Like,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's really tricky to do it right.
Yeah, it can be exceptionally difficult if you don't know how to approach an audience that doesn't know what you mean. And I will say that there will be some cases where you will have an audience member that will get butthurt just because you breathed the wrong word in the wrong direction. So if it's just like one person that's upset, that's fine. But if you have an entire audience worth of people that are all hating on whatever you did, you may have done something wrong. You may want to evaluate what's being said.
Mhm.
But I think for now that we are going to call it for the night. For those of you
Right.
that were enjoying that and would like to see more of it, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, ring the notification bell, follow on Twitch, all that good stuff. If you want to show further support to the channel, there's a link in the description for my Discord, my Patreon. You can also check out my Twitch. Big thank you to my priest tier Patreons, Ice Crystal and not Skarmic. Skarmic's gone. Ice Crystal and Cameo Shadowness. I also want to say a big thank you to my YouTube members and my Twitch subs. Without all y'all's help, I could not continue doing what I am doing. And we will be back again, hopefully tomorrow. We're still got to make sure everybody's going to be there for Lost Memories, Second Chances. I will more than likely be live again between now and then. Either that, or you can probably catch me live with Blue early Sunday morning, and then Sunday we will have Lost Memories, Heart of Darkness. So, other than that, just keep an eye out for. I actually will have a big announcement coming out soon. A couple of things that I have planned for the end of the year and into the new year, as well as a announcement for a new channel coming up soon that I will be posting about. So keep an eye out for all of that. Other than that, everybody have a great evening, and don't forget to drink water.
Hydrate or dehydrate.
Thanks for having us.